what I was thinking in terms of the data stuff, because we open with the moon in Pisces,
Yeah.
that if there's a way that the data can be spread out, so it's not just, hi, welcome, data, 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 data. If there are parts where you can give them like an overview, I don't know, just put that in your head.
I'm not sure what you mean. So data, what kind of data?
Well, weren't you talking about the cycles? I thought you meant the Uranus Pluto history stuff and
Oh, well, I don't know. We'll talk
all right.
about it. I have no idea. I'm open to doing that
Yeah.
anytime throughout. We don't have to do it.
Yeah, there's a
upfront.
way we can weave it through, although we
But
have,
we have the public lecture to do. That's kind of
yeah. And I have a client at 9:30 in the morning. Do you want a drink?
Yeah. What time is it?
7, we have time.
Okay. Soda hot chocolate on the bar.
Good. So you seem to be in good form.
Yeah, I'm okay. Considering, I mean, just considering how crazy it's been, I'm as good as can be.
You know what the most exciting thing about this is? How life will be easy to get back.
Well, I'll have another 2 weeks of
2 weeks?
editing.
That much?
Well, because we've been doing 1.5 a week, and in Mexico, if we get Sag and
Weather?
so this is current high
Yeah.
low, so it's down to 40s at night.
Yeah,
Okay.
it gets right.
Yeah.
You're not ready? Oh, sure.
No, not quite yet.
No,
We're close.
no.
You have a baby?
Plays the mean harmonica too.
Oh, what?
Yeah. Start playing in the car one day in the car seat.
So you got to be careful.
I know.
Yeah, Katie's got a lot to do.
And Sarah.
Sarah?
I know. Back from the favorite. It's off like a food.
Earlier, and you're ready. That's fine. I just want to get the bright English things.
Yeah, I'm looking up the date.
I got it down.
Here we go, January 20th through 22nd. How I know it's not by our name, but by your cousin.
Okay, so it's the
20th through the 22nd. And I wish I thought about it and asked to put in a video of having it happening. 22nd.
yeah. No, I think it's actually better if somewhere maybe 15, 20 minutes into it, when people are watching, that we bring it up and talk about it because we already have their attention.
It bothers my theatrical side of my
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Soul Food Books. Holler if you're alive out there tonight. That's right. We got a full house tonight. You can tell it's getting cold out. For 5 years, we've been standing true as a community gathering place, and it gives me a great honor to invite you guys to an event we're having next week. On your tables are a flyer called Items from the Audience. It's a way for the city of Redmond to come out to talk to the city of Redmond to find out what's going on in the arts. I'm on my second term as the chairman of the Arts Commission for the city of Redmond. I've convinced the Arts Commission to come out next Thursday night, as well as the mayor, to come and invite all artists and artisans, people who are players in the creating field that serve this town, to come out and show yourself. And so if you are troublemakers in the art, come out next Thursday night from 7 to 9, or if you know somebody. And then open mic is this Saturday night if you want to come out and sing. And tonight, you have to be quiet and behave yourself because Rick and Jeff are in the house. Please welcome everybody to Astrology Night.
Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
Oh, there's people here.
Good evening. Welcome to Astrology Night at SoulFood Books. I'm Jeff Jower. This is Rick Levine.
And I'm Rick Levine.
He's Gemini rising, so he has to do everything twice. How many of you
Twice.
are? How many of you are at your first Astrology Night here at SoulFood? Thank you very much for joining us. What we will be doing tonight is an overview of the major collective astrological cycles for the month of November. It's being live streamed by Ustream through SoulFood Books, and it will be posted online within the next 24 hours on YouTube or at stariq.com, which is the website that Rick and I created a long, long time ago in the prehistoric days. Before there was an internet.
When there were magneto wind-up computers.
Right. So what we're talking about is the collective cycles. We know we all have our own individual lives and our individual stories, and we're going to experience things in our unique ways. Yet no matter how much of an individualistic fish you might be, we are all swimming in the same ocean. So the collective cycles are reminders of the things that we share, which are quite important in terms of understanding where humanity is going. So Rick and I are going to do that for about 40, 45 minutes or so. We'll take a short break, and then we will look at 3 individual charts. These charts will be done by drawing. If you would like us to look at your chart, we're going to do little mini readings, 4 or 5 minutes each. Just put your first name, your time, date, and place of birth on the table over here behind our lovely videographer, Julie. And then those who attach the largest sums of money to their birth data will be selected. And we will, at random, pick 3 charts, and we will put them up. And after the break, we'll give you an example of what individual astrology looks like. Do you have anything to add?
No. Are we done?
Good. Oh, no. All right. Well, it's a funny night because Rick and I have a 7 a.m. flight tomorrow morning to go to Mexico to do a seminar. Rick will be packing at 6. I will be playing with video until 3. So hopefully you'll get some lucidity tonight.
Yeah, or something.
An important idea about astrology is it's not something that makes us do things. It is a mirror of the cosmos of which we are parts. And it is our purpose in doing these astrology nights to help each of us understand how we can more successfully navigate the waters that we are all swimming in. While these certainly look like scary times in lots of ways, they are also times in which opportunities for breakthroughs and discoveries as individuals and as a community certainly can happen. And we believe that astrology is one of the most useful tools to describe the shape of what is and what's to come so that we can participate in the process consciously.
And we sure are living in interesting times. I remember standing here on this stage 2 or 3 years ago, talking about the potential for the changes ahead, projecting forward back a few years ago, projecting forward to 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, and talking about the similarity between some of the deeper, slower moving rhythms that we are now in that are very similar to, or at least resonate to, the changes and the astrological rhythms of the mid and late 60s. And I remember talking here on this stage back 3-4 years ago about the potential for social revolution, for the idea that the appearance of protesting in the streets could actually be something that we would see in this country, which then seemed totally asleep. And yet, I'm here today not to say, oh, we were right, because all astrologers, or many astrologers, have been talking about this. But I'm here today to remind us that what we've seen over the past 8-10 months, beginning with the Arab Spring and riots in London, and insurrections and the passing of batons from dictators to people who are seizing control, country by country by country by country, and now appears to be gaining steam in this country. I'm here to remind us that we are just at the tip of the iceberg, that this is not the event. This is the foreshadowing of the event, that we are, in fact, moving into a period of time of the next 2-3 years that will not allow what we're seeing now to just peak and die off. One of the benefits of understanding and working with astrology is not, as Jeff said earlier, is not in its prediction of what will happen, but in its understanding of the nature of the waves, so that we can then decide what our involvement in them may be. And I'm just here to remind us that we have waves yet in front of us, and that we should all be polishing our surfboards and practicing taking care of ourselves, because the waves will grow stronger, and we need to be ready to not just ride them, but to work them.
Well put, Rick. And tonight is actually a good night to understand some of this. The primary planetary pattern that Rick was referring to is the pending square or challenging 90-degree angle between Uranus, the planet of liberation and freedom, and Pluto, the planet of death and rebirth or transformation. And it's those two planets that were joined together in the 1960s. Well, liberation is a really interesting idea, and I think a very fundamental one to the planet Uranus. And tonight, Mercury, the fast-moving planet of intellect, forms a harmonious angle with Uranus. Move it up a day.
Yes, sir.
He lives in the past, but not very far in the past, only a day. Okay, so Mercury, the planet of communication, is now in Sagittarius, a sign of the big mouth, the opinionated one.
Having just moved there today, in fact, which is part of today's buzz.
Absolutely. And Mercury, yeah, they're buzzing in Europe as the Greek thing is getting kind of weird over there. But Mercury is trying to harmonize the most favorable astrological angle with Uranus tonight, which suggests that our collective minds or intellects are placed in a way where we have a capacity to see change from a creative perspective. So allow your minds later tonight, when you're going to sleep, to imagine a future as you would like to see it. Put no limits on the vision that you hold. Allow your child self to appear. Allow your greedy self, your desirous self, your fearful self, your optimistic self. Invite all of you to imagine what you would like the world to look like. Now, I'm not suggesting that your thought alone is going to create that future, but the collective radio broadcasts of forward-looking minds creates an atmosphere of acceptance of change as well as creativity, rather than the resistance to change, which will probably be the thing that we have most to fear.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on what Jeff was talking about, which again is this planet Mercury having just moved into Sagittarius and harmonizing. That's this big fat blue line that's connecting it with Uranus in Aries. But I want to focus just for a moment on this area of the chart, because Mercury and Venus Jeff said, think about what you like. Interestingly, this combined both of those planets because Mercury is the planet of thinking. It's the messenger planet. It's how we send and receive information. It's the words that we speak and the words that we hear and what happens when it hits our brain. It's how we think. And Venus is what we like. It's what we're attracted to. So Jeff said, think, Mercury, about what you like, Venus. These two are holding hands as they moved from where they were yesterday in deep dark Scorpio, today into uplifting and aspirational Sagittarius. And it's not just Mercury forming that trine with futuristic, electric, freedom-loving Uranus. It's Venus also. So our attractions and our desires, what we like, is tied up in this. And what's interesting here, I think, is that this time of year, November, when the sun is in Scorpio, this is the Halloween period of time, the end of October, the beginning or the first part of November, when the veil between this world and other worlds grows thin, we move into the darkness, into the depths of winter. And what's happening now, however, is that Mercury and Venus, our antenna, our aesthetic antenna, Venus, and our intellectual antenna, Mercury, are moving ahead of the sun, and they're already like checking out the ground in futuristic, goal-oriented, aspirational Sagittarius. The sun moves from dark Scorpio into Sagittarius on the 21st, I think. On the
22nd.
On the 22nd. But in a way, what's happening is that not only are we getting this positive, uplifting Sagittarius energy, but both of those planets are running into this electric buzz of futuristic Uranus that's really giving us, as Jeff said, not only the ability to think about the future, but the ability to dream it in such a way that we can perhaps begin to create it.
Yeah, that makes a great deal of sense to me. And as Rick pointed out, the sun goes into Sagittarius on the 22nd of November. And the sun is the only sort of consistently moving body with our calendar that...
You mean every year it goes into the new sign on the same day, or give or take a day?
Within 24 hours or so. But what that means is that if Mercury, the intellect, the messenger, and Venus, the planet of like, love, and attraction, are sort of leading the parade. I imagine little like creatures popping up out of the ground and looking over a snowy field, imagining the spring that's yet to come. On the 22nd of the month, the sun, which represents will, creativity, consciousness, and life force itself, going into Sagittarius, is essentially illuminating what we're thinking about tonight and tomorrow. So you don't have to do much about it yet. But but if you sort of put the intellectual and aesthetic nets of interest out there, you'll be able, I think, to empower them with will and with action when the sun goes into Sagittarius. Now, before we get there, I'm switching to Mars. Is that good for you? Okay.
Switching to Mars is always good for me. I'm an Aries with a gazillion planets in Aries, and Mars is the key planet of Aries.
Right.
So I never have an objection to anyone switching to Mars. Let's go.
But I wanted to say this. Mars sucks. That's it.
But it sucks well. I didn't say that.
Well, well, it depends where Mars is on your body. No, or what sign of the zodiac it's in.
So we have Venus and Mercury lined up today. Venus is the planet of love, and Mercury is the planet of talk. Get it?
Right.
Here we are talking
It's
about...
big talk.
Yeah.
But why Mars is so important right now, Mars, which is the planet of action. Mars is the ignition. It is the planet that represents getting things in motion in a physical sense. It is the sun that is required to sustain that motion. But think of Mars to a certain extent like first gear in a standard shift car. It's really about getting things rolling.
Or ignition in a rocket. It's that moment of ignition, of getting going.
Right.
Starting.
And Mars now is in Leo. a sign that's bold, creative, dramatic, expressive, egocentric, self-important, infantile, grandiose, creative, generous, overstated, any other ideas. But Mars becomes a very interesting player as it changes signs this month. We're going to elaborate on that a little bit later on. But before Mars moves on to the next sign, which is Virgo, Virgo's there to clean up after Leo, after the parade, or...
Which it does on the 10th.
Thank you. Or to apply the creative impulses that Leo gives us. You know, it's like, God, I got a great song. If only I knew how to play an instrument or sing, I could really do something with it. Well, Virgo is the instrument or the skill that allows Leo's expression to take a useful form. Well, Mars, as Rick pointed out, is heading to Virgo. It'll be there on the 10th, but before it gets there, it slips on a grease spot of delusion on November 7th, when Mars opposes Neptune.
Well, a grease spot of delusion and illusion and spirituality. And here we have an interesting piece of astrology. Often the information in astrology helps us understand things in the real world, or in this case, in the unreal world. But Neptune is considered to be the planet of delusion and spirituality. Now, is that to say that spirituality is delusion? No, but it is to say that there's a fine line between illusions, imagination that's not real, delusions, and the metaphysical beyond the real physical world and the spiritual aspirations that we have. And that if you look back in your life, the beliefs that you had maybe 5 years ago or 20 years ago, you might say, boy, I was really misled. I was in a world of delusion then. Now I have clarity and I understand what spiritual meaning really is. And so, yes, Mars slips on this opposition to Neptune, which certainly can be diluted. Diluted? But
with both spellings, actually.
But it also can be highly imaginative, and it's hard to tell which.
The common element, why would delusion or illusion and spirituality fall under the same symbol astrologically? Because they are both unbound by the material world.
Right.
That's all. There are things that don't belong to the material world that are just passing fantasies that are spinning through your mind. But there also are dimensions beyond this physical world that Neptune is very much at home in.
Interestingly enough, Sigmund Freud, who I know is a bit politically incorrect in many ways these days, wrote a book about religion called The Future of an Illusion. Just throwing it out there as we talk about Neptune and the seas of consciousness, the non-physical, the metaphysical realms where illusion and creative imagination and delusion are sometimes hard to distinguish because there are no lines, there are no boundaries in the imaginal realm. And now we have on the 7th, Mars running into an exact opposition, a tug of war. Mars, which as Jeff talked about in Leo, is bold and fiery and all those words. You were so Leo when you went through that list of things. It was really good because you really got the sense across of what Mars in Leo is. And then Mars, while it's still in Leo, bumps into this kind of mist, and it just can't quite figure out what's out there, where it's going. The wind that has powered its sails kind of stops. The idea of the doldrums, where the winds stop blowing, all of a sudden all that power and aggression and assertion moving forward, that motivation, it's like now you just go,
Well, that's certainly one side of Mars opposite Neptune is acting. That's the Mars word. On an illusion, Neptune, wasting your time, going on wild goose chases, tilting at windmills, all these kinds of things represent negative or undesirable or certainly inefficient aspects of Mars opposite Neptune. The high point, or a positive expression of it, is inspired action that moves us beyond the bounds of the limits of ordinary reality. But the reason, and we normally, I don't think, would emphasize this aspect so much, but why I think it is so important is it leads up to what I think is a pivot point this month on November 10th. As Rick pointed out earlier, Mars shifts signs. It moves into Virgo on November 10th, which means that the planet of action is moving from the creative brainstorming realm of Leo and into the workshop reality of practical, earthy, functional, constructive Virgo. On the 10th as well, we have the full moon. So the 10th of the month, of this month, I think is extra important. And what the issue about the 7th is, to avoid going off on crazy fantasies, whether they are creatively going forward in a way that's not likely to produce anything tangible, or whether they are paranoid fears. You know, Mars is a warrior. Mars is a battler. Mars is a fighter. Who does Mars fight in Neptune? Illusions and fantasies.
Windmills.
Sometimes.
Windmills.
Tilts.
It's the
yes.
Don Quixote syndrome in some way.
Absolutely. So because Mars is changing signs 3 days later and entering a sign that it will be in for 8 months or some ridiculous
Normally Mars
period of
whizzes
time.
through a sign in what, 8 weeks, 8 weeks?
7 weeks, 7, 8 weeks.
But once every other year, Mars does this retrograde dance where it hangs out in the same sign for up to 8 months. And so Mars, which has just spent, you know, like 7 weeks in Cancer and 7 weeks in Leo, now gets into Virgo, and all of a sudden, it's like having someone come over and playing a game of chess once a month. And then one time they come over and they stay for 8 weeks or 8 months. And then they leave. It's the same thing, except the energy changes because it gains gravitas, it gains weight, because Mars doesn't just whiz through Virgo. So its move into Virgo is extremely important, as Jeff is pointing out.
Right, because it's going to be there for so long. And if Mars really represents our capacity to get a grip on something, then Mars, the action planet, in detailed, specific, refined, and practical Virgo, is going to require a very careful degree of control to make anything happen. When Virgo, and I don't mean that necessarily about Virgo individuals, although it's sometimes the case, but Virgo has very small tolerances for imperfections. And with Mars, the action planet in Virgo, it's really about, if you line things up precisely, you can get extraordinary results. A little bit of perfection or precision in the beginning can take you very far. But being off target a little bit can bog things down. It's like getting dust in the engine of your Ferrari. It's so tightly tuned that it's off. That's why I didn't bring my Ferrari tonight, because it's pretty dusty out there in the rain.
Well, it's like aiming for something like far away, like Pluto. If you're off just like a little bit, by the time you get there, you miss the target by millions of miles.
Right. So now I guess Mars is square the next full moon. We astrologers suffer from temporal dyslexia because we're writing about the future, looking at tomorrow. I don't know what month it is.
I call it tempolexia.
Okay, we've got it. But this Mars in Virgo thing means this. Whatever your big ideas and your big ambitions are, break off a small piece that you can handle. If you don't have a small piece that you can handle, if you lack the skill or if you lack the training to write the grand opera of your dreams or to build the house of your dreams or whatever it is, start getting training. Getting training. It's kind of interesting. If we are in a period of time of great cultural shift and the planet of action moves into the sign of effectiveness and efficiency for 8 months, what does that mean? It means that those who are the most competent are going to have the most impact on the culture. And while that may sound good, you know, there are lots of people who are competent, but you wouldn't want them to be the effective leaders of the culture. That in a society...
Except they already are, aren't they?
Well,
Some
yeah.
of them.
It's the Martin Bormann syndrome. Martin Bormann was Hitler's secretary who took on this enormous amount of power because he served and worked so hard, and he was so good and efficient at what he did. I mean, he didn't have the requisite morality or lack thereof. He didn't have big political or social skills necessarily, but like a good worker bee, he worked himself into a position of high authority. That does not take morals. And I think the thing that astrology points out on a collective level is there's openings here. There are energetic openings for things to happen. If you don't take the job, somebody else will. And the job of Mars in Virgo is to do what you want to do well. Doesn't mean you can't get sloppy at other things. So we're going to have to kind of tighten up our rear ends for 8 months and not be able to take a deep breath. Not at all. But it does mean in a focused Mars way that those places or that place where you can sharpen your knife to cut more effectively will have a long-term effect that can bring about extraordinarily positive changes.
Now, I think we have what Jeff talked or has been talking about is really significant on a number of levels, but the actual transition of Mars from Leo into Virgo is wrapped around some really interesting astrological events. First of all, remember Mars on the 7th was exactly opposed Neptune, and so until it moves into Virgo late on the 10th, it still will be in range of being kind of like losing its focus right at the end of its game in Leo. And remember, Leo is about games. It's about playing the game. And so here we have Mars losing its focus, and then on the 10th, it slips into Virgo to theoretically gain more focus on the same day as a full moon, and the full moon is in, like Virgo, another earth sign, Taurus, which is another piece of kind of regaining focus. Even though the full moon isn't necessarily about focus, it's often about flooding or opening of the gates of imagination. But here, the imagination, the moon, the feelings are about being practical. So this is one interesting piece of what happens as Mars slides into Virgo to become focused. It gets help from this full moon. But what happens then over the next couple of days is that as Mars moves into Virgo, it forms a quincunx, which is Latin for 5/12. It's one of those aspects that's difficult to describe because it's like oil and water. It makes the two planets not mix well. And here we have Mars narrowing its focus in Virgo, moving into a quincunx with Uranus, which is this whole futuristic, and kind of high anxiety, nervousness that's about breaking through the constraints. And so there's this question of how do we pull this energy in and make it useful? I think it's going to be tough at first.
Well,
I say at first, we'll come back to that in a little bit.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit about this full moon. Full moons, as we say here, regularly represent moments of awareness and sometimes moments of crisis. But I think this full moon is particularly valuable and interesting. As Rick pointed out, it's in an earth sign, Taurus. Earth signs have to do with what's practical and real and down to earth. Mars is in Virgo. Jupiter is in earthy Taurus. Jupiter is still with this blue line, making harmonious trines to Pluto, meaning that the planet of expansion in resourceful Taurus will help us dig up resources we didn't know that we had. But this full moon in the full moon in Taurus is about recognizing what already works and pleases you that you don't have to pay for. See, because the sun in Scorpio is acutely aware of what you're hungry for or what we're missing. That's very much about what Scorpio is. It dives down into the belly of the beast to discover what is it that I desire that I don't have. Yet Taurus, which is the sign of fat, dumb, and happy, is I'm a Taurus, so I'm some of those things, depending.
Actually, you're none of those things. Not true.
Well, I would be if I was fatter. But what Taurus is about is appreciating what is. It's the Garden of Eden sign. This fixed earth sign of the mid-spring is the recognition that there are things already in our lives that work that we don't have to pay for.
Did you say it was the Garden of Eating?
That too, if you're lucky, right? Taurus is the Garden of Eden. So what this full moon offers is an opportunity to balance whatever notions we have about personal crisis or collective crisis with an awareness of the things that are pleasing and rewarding and comfortable in the present. And, you know, everything is relative, right? You know, in a severely contracted economic environment, I mean, we'd be thrilled to be warm at night. And in one that we couldn't get warm at night, we'd be happy to be dry and cold. So what Taurus is about is recognizing the good things that are already there. And I think that helps balance some of the anxiety of these times and certainly some of that scorpionic cynicism about our capacity to extract ourselves from difficulty. I have to tell you, because I think there's one level of Scorpio that wants things to fail, because there's something very exciting to Scorpio about a real-life disaster movie. And I don't mean that means individual Scorpios are hoping that, you know, there's more suffering in the world. Not at all. But there is something that can be profoundly satisfying if you're fearful to have those fears met. Yes, life sucks and my limbs are falling off and all I see is pain and suffering around me. But I'm right. There's something reassuring in that.
But there's something else about what you're saying that I think is significant too, because Scorpio's attraction to the disaster is also its attraction to the ending and decomposition that allows the magic of the phoenix, the magical mystical bird, the phoenix, which arises from the ashes of the ruins of destruction. Operative words here are ashes, ruins, and destruction. You need death for rebirth to occur. And this is a basic piece of the Scorpio theme. So it's not only the angst of destruction, it's also the process that destruction then leaves room for a rebirth on a higher level. This is nihilism as Nietzsche really meant it, not as it was interpreted by the Third Reich.
And Rick, I think you've turned around the full moon to illuminate it from another perspective. And that is, while I was selling the wonderfulness of the moon in Taurus, the other side of it is, part of the illumination of this full moon in Taurus is where you are fat and dumb and really not that happy, but just too unimaginative to change. It can illuminate those places where we're sort of stuck in perhaps comfy cocoons, but ones which will keep us from the transformational processes that Scorpio is about.
I saw a bumper sticker yesterday that said, if ignorance is really bliss, then how come everyone's not happy?
That's pretty stupid, and I don't get it.
Well, never mind. So what's interesting, though, about the days after the full moon, once Mars moves into Virgo and forms that kind of annoying high-tension quincunx with Uranus, is that as it moves on, it then forms trines with both Jupiter and then Pluto. Remember, Jupiter and Pluto have been in this trine phase that was exact last month for the second of 3 times. They're backing out of that phase exactly now, but Mars, as it moves through Virgo, forms an exact trine with Jupiter on the 16th and with Pluto on the 23rd, which holds that pattern for much of the month, which is really, in effect, a grand trine or grand triangle in practical Earth that And as I said earlier, Mars runs into Virgo, and at first it's not easy because of the quincunx to Uranus, but then it really gets it gets its grounding. It gets a place to get traction, because this is a very, very powerful wave that it gets to ride that enables us, I think, as you were talking about earlier, that if we decide to focus on improving our skill set, into making our tools more useful, we can do incredibly powerful work, I think, with this.
I agree. And what's important as well at this time is you don't always have to know what it means or even have full confidence in what you're doing to be effective. The reason I'm saying that is because Mars in Virgo doesn't require confidence. It's really not about attitude so much as it is about performance.
Right.
And what sort of kicked off that thought in my head was in between Mars's harmonious trine to Jupiter and its harmonious, positively flowing aspect with potent Pluto, the Sun on the 20th, the Sun is will. The Sun is the chairman of the board, squares Neptune. So it's almost as if this 90-degree angle between the Sun or will and fuzzy Neptune brings us back to, on the one hand, delusion, but on the other hand, it can be, well, I'm not confident. I'm not certain. The will, the ego, the I that the Sun represents is going through sort of a little foggy zone. Yet, if Mars, the driver in Virgo, keeps his hands on the wheel and has memorized the map and the road effectively, you won't run off the road. So what that means is, if you happen to go through one of those patches, what am I doing here? Why am I doing that? Well, that's right. Don't speed up. Don't speed up, but as long as it's competent, as long as it has some degree of constructiveness to it, stay on track. Thank you, Donna.
You know what's interesting, Jeff, is that we started out tonight, or at least you talked about quite a bit, about Mars as it moved from Leo to Virgo, how it opposed Neptune and kind of lost its footing, and then it moves into Virgo. Well, you just described the Sun at the very end of Scorpio, in effect losing its footing a bit as it squares Neptune, and yet as it moves into Sagittarius over the next few days after that, it moves into the place where Mercury and Venus are now and forms that trine with Uranus, and it's almost like it bails us out of this not knowing. So if we hold our course steady, if we just keep somehow moving along at the same pace, all of a sudden the lightning strikes, the clouds dissipate, and we have blue sky, and we have like another round of launch.
Right, and I think, I was thinking of this in political terms or social terms. So the Sun squared Neptune is a real good opportunity for leaders to get up and lie. That may happen. As
opposed to every other day.
Right, right. It's a special occasion for doing that. And what we can do for ourselves and for the leaders, whether they be political or other kinds of institutions, is to ask what the methods are. How are you going to do this? This blue sky possibility of sloganeering is a very good Sun kind of Neptune thing. And if you happen to fall for a good sounding but unsubstantial idea on the 20th, as Rick pointed out, a couple of days later, the Sun, in its harmonious relationship to innovative Uranus, may come up with better or more interesting answers. On a personal level, what it means is if you want to buy something on the 20th and you're taken by the glamour of it, you're taken by, ooh, this is the car I always wanted, ooh, this is the designer thing, ooh, this is the seminar that's going to change my life, I would encourage you to wait 2 days, because you may come up with a perspective that will lead you to something more interesting.
I'd actually encourage you to wait 3 weeks, because Mercury turns retrograde on the 23rd.
Oh, okay.
Well, here we get to a place about astrology where, unfortunately, things aren't as precise or clear as we would like to. It's like standing in the ocean and the tides, coming in, and the force of the waves is really strong, and yet there's this undertow that you feel dragging in a different direction. And so what you just described is absolutely true, and yet behind that, Mercury is slowing down, and on the 23rd, and the 23rd and 24th is very powerful, because it's not only Mercury turning retrograde, but it's also a solar eclipse. It's a new moon eclipse. And so we have a real turning point here. And so the decisions that we make in that moment of clarity may actually go through a round of reevaluation or reconsideration over the ensuing few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Mercury, the communicator, does go retrograde or turns backwards for 3 weeks or so, 3 times a year, and it's associated with Mercury problems, difficulty with communication, confusion, details, technology and travel problems. And this time we've got Mercury in Sagittarius, which is not the easiest place for Mercury.
And why is that, Jeff?
Because Mercury is in charge of the little details. But Mercury is not interested in details in Sagittarius. It's like taking somebody who's got a good level of competence, and because of that competence, now they think they're philosophers, and they're going to lead us into some brave new world that they're describing, but that's really not their strength. So with Mercury in Sagittarius, it's easy to make promises we don't live up to. It's easy to have high hopes without plans of how we're going to reach those hopes. So this Mercury retrograde period is one in which there is likely to be even more rhetoric than usual, and this kind of phony cheerleader quality. Yes, we can. Can what? And how? And when? And what cost? Can we do it? That's the real thing to be aware of for yourself or your inner cheerleader and the other cheerleaders in your life. Look, Sagittarius is a great sign. Enthusiasm is a wonderful thing. And even Mercury can bring us some great inspiration in Sagittarius. But it can be particularly misleading to be excited about pictures of a promised land without any well-defined plan to how to get there.
Interestingly, the sun moves into Sagittarius every year toward the end of November. And as you may know, the days of the week are named after the planets: Moon Day and Mars Day, Marty, and Mercury Day, and Thor's Day, which is Thursday, which is named after the Norse god that corresponds to Jupiter. And the first Jupiter Day, Jupiter is the ruling planet of Sagittarius, and the first Jupiter Day, or Thursday, after the sun moves into Sagittarius every year, is the ultimate Sagittarian holiday, where what you just said is we give thanks to this great idea without knowing whatever the details were. Let's forget that we, kind of eradicated a few races, in the process and whatever. But it's just about this idea of everything's cool and and we all love each other. Or, there's this idea of human camaraderie and spirit.
Right. That's a good a picture of the hypocrisy of Sagittarius, the hypocrisy of Thanksgiving. I mean, I always liked Thanksgiving, not necessarily for the food, but because it was a secular holiday with a sort of a spiritual message of things. But of course, the very pilgrims or whoever it was, early European settlers in the U.S., who broke bread with those Native Americans, wound up chasing them off their land, imprisoning them, killing them, and all that. And so that's very much a kind of Sagittarian thing. We are so happy to go there that we're not even feeling the people under our feet that we're crushing along the way. That's the dark side of Sagittarius. That's the dark tale of enthusiasm or hypermoralism or religion or judgment. And although this is an appropriate time of the year, Sagittarius, to be enthusiastic, it is also one, particularly with Mercury retrograde, to be careful about our judgments.
So Mercury turns retrograde the day before Thanksgiving, and on Thanksgiving we have a new moon solar eclipse. Yikes! I'm not getting together with my family.
Well,
it's because they kicked me out.
yeah. there's a paradox with with a new moon eclipse, because the new moon, when the sun and moon join together every lunar month, represents the beginning of a new monthly cycle. But an eclipse always throws us back into the dark, in a way, back into the past. At a new moon eclipse, the shadow of the moon is cast upon the sun, which is fundamentally about stepping back from the will, the ego of the sun, to feel, to reflect, to remember. It's almost like, in an old-fashioned way, if the sun is the king and he's making proclamations, the queen, that moon who is eclipsing him, is pulling on his cloak and going, dear, we don't have the money to do that. Dear, we can't do that. So what this eclipse represents on one level are the big promises that really need to be reviewed and revised, not just because of Mercury retrograde, but because it's an eclipse as well. Good news is, however...
Oh, there's a lot of good news about this eclipse, actually.
Yeah, Uranus is trying the eclipse. And again, what trines mean are support, help, easy flow. So the planet of innovation is trying the new moon eclipse, meaning that, hey, this great idea or this thing you want to do, well, it's probably not going to work the way you expected. But if you keep an open mind and don't get too Sagittarian and absolute about where you're going, you may discover an alternative route which will be even more effective.
Yeah, and actually, there's, aside from the eclipse being trine to Uranus, the blue lines largely represent smoothly flowing energy. And as you can see here, there's a predominance of that, or, you know, and so we're also coming off of Mars's trine to Pluto, which was just the day before, but that's still in operation. And we're moving into, toward the end of the month, an exact trine between Venus as it changes signs on the 26th. On the 26th, by the 27th, Venus moving into Capricorn forms a trine with Jupiter. Venus and Jupiter in traditional classical astrology, they're considered the benefics. They're considered the two good planets. Venus lesser good than Jupiter, maybe because she's smaller and maybe because he's a guy, whatever. But the fact is that when Venus and Jupiter form this harmonious trine, which is, as Jeff said earlier, astrology's best aspect, this means that the month really ends on a high note. We kind of go through this transition, this change. Mercury is retrograde. We are reconsidering. There is this new moon eclipse. It's kind of a turning point, but there's good stuff behind this eclipse.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit worried about the health factors of the turkey we eat. With Jupiter in Taurus, quincunx the eclipse on Thanksgiving. It's all connected to Jupiter, and something isn't fitting quite right. Now, maybe that just means
I think you're right.
The usual overeating, but, you know, if lettuce could knock off, you know, 100 people, or how many died from the listeria, whatever vegetable, just get your turkey in a good place. And
E. coli and lettuce, listeria and cantaloupe. Let's just get our bacteria correct.
Thank you. Get your bacteria correct. But I would recommend
Mars and Virgo wanting to get the information correct.
Yeah, I would recommend that you have either the youngest or oldest member of your family taste the turkey first and wait a while, because the young ones will recover and the old ones have had a good long life. So, but for the rest of you, you know, we want you to enjoy the holiday. Now, I really appreciate you, Rick, ending the month on a fairly high note.
I hear a but coming.
Well, only that. And this is a funny thing, because Rick and I, we switched the roles of good astrologer, bad astrologer, cop, that is. That I will often tell good stories, and he will tell us why they're really bad ones. And
Because they are.
Yeah. and then we flip them around. Venus, the planet of love, harmonized with Jupiter, certainly represents, as Rick said, astrology's favorite angle between its favorite planets. But Venus, that planet of love, as we go a little further down the road, she forms a 90-degree square with Uranus, and then she's going to meet Pluto in early December. What that means is the gift of awareness, the gift of a relationship, The gift of a bigger paycheck that maybe Venus trine Jupiter suggests may then be followed by a surprise and some costs that you didn't expect. So just don't spend it all, whether it's money, whether it's, you know, your pre-Hanukkah gifts, whether it's meeting somebody. Just know that Venus, although she has a nice little period with her trine to Jupiter, the road to pleasure takes some unusual twists and turns over the following week. That's all?
That's all, folks.
I'd like to remind you of something or share something with you. Rick and I do a weekend retreat every year at Brighton Bush Hot Springs, which is in the old growth forest about an hour east of Salem, Oregon. We'll be there January 20th through the 22nd this year. If you don't know about Brighton Bush, you should, because it's a fascinating place with hot springs. It's off the grid. It's
one of the Northwest's treasures.
Yeah, it's Occupy the Cascades, but it's been occupied for 40 years. But it's a lovely place. Check it out. BREITEN, Brighton Bush Hot Springs. Check it out. And if you can come, that'd be great.
Yeah, and what we do that weekend is kind of a longer version of what we do tonight, except we work with individual charts instead of drawing 3 out of a hat and talking about them for 5 minutes. We usually have a group of, I don't know, maybe 15 to 25 or so. And we have time throughout the weekend to work with each individual chart as a group process. And so what we're doing at that particular weekend workshop is we're looking at the upcoming year the way we look tonight at the upcoming month. And rather than focusing on the day by day, we're focusing on the major events for 2012. And then we will look at the individual charts in relationship to that. And it's brightonbush.com.
So we're going to take about a 10 to 12 minute break. And if you'd like your chart looked at, first name, time, date, and place of birth on the table here behind Julie. And peruse the books, the jewelry, the food, the lovely SoulFood staff, and come back in 10.
Round of applause for Rick and Jeff tonight.
So glad I found you. God is around Dr. King, I think often of you and the love that you learned from Jesus. Dr. King, I think often of you and the love that you learned from Jesus. Alabama, Alabama, Bethlehem. Dr. King, I think often of you and the love that you learned from Jesus. Dr. King, I think often of you and the love that you learned from Jesus. Alabama, Alabama, up ahead as we from mighty task, love the face behind hatred's mask. 'Cause on the day we understand our past, God Almighty will be free at last. Up ahead as we from mighty task, love the face behind hatred's mask. 'Cause on the day we understand our past, God Almighty will be free at last. Alabama, Alabama, told me, let's stay out late, let's walk the world. Well, she told me it was my mistake. Who amphetamine girl? She told me, let's stay out long on top of the world. Well, she told me, honey, was I wrong? Or was I wrong, amphetamine girl? What am I gonna do now that she is gone? What am I gonna do now that she is gone? What am I gonna do? What does this world mean without my little white-skinned girl, my mean amphetamine? She told me to stay out high on top of the world. Well, she told me, honey, oh my, amphetamine girl. What am I gonna do now that she is gone? What am I gonna do now that she is gone? What am I gonna do? What does this world mean without my little white-skinned girl, my mean amphetamine? Amphetamine, amphetamine, amphetamine. Oh, honey, you let me down. Oh, honey, you let me down. amphetamine, amphetamine, amphetamine. Just let the disc play. This is a song to give you hope. I wouldn't have it any other way. This is a song to give you hope. When you say, honey, I'm afraid to sleep at night, sleep at night. Honey, I'm afraid to sleep at night, sleep at night. Well, I wish I had my arms around you. This is a song to give you hope. Just let this thing surround you. This is a song to give you hope. When you say, honey, I'm afraid to sleep at night, sleep at night. Honey, I'm afraid to leave tonight, leave tonight. I say, hey, go, go on, go on. I said, I love you truly, so go on, yeah, and get a jump on the finer things. This is a song to give you hope. You never know what the past will bring you. This is a song to give you hope. When you say, honey, I'm afraid to sleep at night, sleep at night. Honey, I'm afraid to leave tonight, leave tonight. I said, go, go on, go on. I said, I love you truly, so go on. South of Monterey and San Lucia Hills. The sunshine shone me to sleep, and I dreamt I was alive. I sang myself a song, it went, know what you know. Stay when you stay, go when you go. And I call it intuition. Flowers bloom, hummingbirds fly. Yes, I call it intuition. It gets me by. Sailing on a silver ship out to the open, lonely and realizing that our friendship's been broken. And the funny thing to me is how quickly it slips away and leaves you thinking of the things that were never spoken. And you know loving me is not enough. And I know few silver ship out to the open, lonely, and realizing that our friendship's been broken. And the funny thing to me is how quickly it slips away and leaves you longing for the things that were never spoken. And you know loving me is not enough.
Ah. Thank you, Clint. Ah.
Jeff, let's welcome the audience back.
Yay! Okay, we're going to take a quick look at 3 charts, and as Rick usually gets to point out, this is not a counseling session. It is a demonstration. So thank you for letting us use your chart to demonstrate what a whole astrological chart looks like and some of the ways in which astrologers address charts.
Yeah, a demonstration and a teaching tool.
Yes.
So we're not doing this for you. We're doing this
We're
for
teaching
us.
each other,
Yeah.
basically, because
It's
we
about
just started
time.
last week.
It's about
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So how are your studies coming, Jeff?
I don't know. Let's ask Linda. Linda?
Wait,
is
Linda.
Linda, born October 3rd, 61.
Linda.
Hey, Linda. You have won the lottery here. The first thing
that I notice is that it's an 8 o'clock birth, and I don't trust even numbered or even, because you didn't even write 8.00. You just wrote 8 a.m. So I'm taking that 29-degree Libra rising with a total grain of salt. I don't believe it for a moment.
The fastest moving body we astrologers use is the moon, which takes 2
you don't
hours.
have to stand up. You can.
Which the moon takes 2 hours to move 1 degree. The houses of the chart, which tell us where the energy is, rotate 360 degrees every day. So 1 degree moves in 4 minutes. So in this chart here, it's 29 degrees of Libra rising. And because Linda has a birth time, which sounds like an estimate, we don't know whether you're a Libra rising or a Scorpio rising.
And it may not matter because there's
Right.
1, 2, 3, kapow, 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 planets right at the very beginning of Scorpio coming right up over the horizon. Oh, my God.
Yeah, Librans are really nice, but Linda knows how to bite. I mean, and that's because of Mars. Mars, as we talked about earlier this evening, is the planet of assertion or aggression or initiative. It's somewhere rising in the east, and what's rising in the east at the moment of birth is in the foreground of your story. It's not at the heart of you, but it's what comes up most frequently at first, and Mars is in one of its 2 home signs in Scorpio, the sign of never forget. So even though Linda's a Libra, not only does she have Mars, the action planet in Scorpio, but Mars was 90 degrees away from her moon in Leo. The moon in Leo is, well, I'm a big-hearted person, and all I need is, a throne, a cape, and a very expensive gown and a crown, and I'll be very happy. But Linda's more of a hardscrabble moon in Leo. She had to kill a lot of people to get to the top of her chain because what? I can't say that, honey? Oh, well, it's my wife. She's the kind one in the family. But when Mars is square in a challenging 90-degree angle to the moon of habits and daily routine and emotion, one's on guard. It doesn't mean you're overtly aggressive at all, but it means you're not to be messed with. And you know how to do things the hard way if that's what it takes. Did I use up all the good stuff?
No, you used up all the bad stuff, which is
Okay.
which is fine. It's the good cop. It's the bad cop, good cop.
Good cop,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. What I find interesting here is how it's interesting how buried or hidden some of the sweeter stuff is in your chart. Not that you're not sweet. It's just that the sun in Libra is, regardless of whether you were born 10 or 15 minutes either side of this, the sun is still going to be in the 12th house, which is the hidden house. And so planets in the 12th house often get kind of pushed into a closet, or they hide out in their room, and it's more about imagination. It's more about inner stuff that if you don't work to express can kind of get you. Okay, so that's the first piece of this sun in Libra. I'll come back to more about that in a moment. The second piece is that you notice that there's no lines connecting it with any other planets. All these lines in the center are aspects. They're the way one planet grabs another or works with or harmonizes with another. And the sun in your chart is kind of not connected to the other planets, which is good news and bad news. The bad news is that it's playing by itself, off in this closet. The good news is it doesn't give a damn about whatever anyone or any other planet's saying. It can just do what it needs to do without consulting the committee of all the other planets. And so it's an interesting piece because it's a very strong planet, or strong piece, because it's on its own, and yet it's hidden. Now, the planet that corresponds with Libra, your sun is in Libra, the planet that corresponds with Libra always is Venus, and Venus in your chart is in it's in Virgo, where it's careful and analytical and cautious, but it's lined up with Pluto, which again comes back to where Jeff started with the Mars and Mercury and Neptune all in your first house in Scorpio. There's a sense of the real power. This is not a lighthearted Libran who's ambiguous and ambivalent. This is someone who, when they know what they want and know who they love, expects that in return and will extract blood if needed in order to get what you want, or cut absolutely clean and not have anything to do with it. There's no halfway. There's no Libran nice guy in this. Although the nice is there, it's unquestionably what drives your chart, but it's hard to find. Does that make sense?
Yeah, when Venus, which as Rick said is the key ruling planet of Libra and therefore reveals more about your sun sign, it's an analytical Virgo, it's conjoined the Lord of the underworld, Pluto. It means you don't want things to come that easily, that they don't feel like you've been rewarded. Venus is the channel by which we feel loved, validated, or appreciated. And when Venus is in Virgo, conjunct Pluto, it's sort of the pride in doing the impossible. You'd be really good at doing the impossible. Let's give Linda the job that nobody else can do. We got this guy here to work with. He's brilliant, but he's insane and he smells bad and he's driven everybody else crazy. Linda will handle him. Now we've got a group over here of delightful, charming people. Linda's not going to fit in that group as well because their values, I don't think, supply you with the sense of worth you get by struggling a little harder. It's kind of like good wine grapes. They have to struggle. The roots have to struggle through rocky soil to make good grapes, and that's a little bit like your Venus-Pluto conjunction.
Two things. One is this once every 20-year alignment of Jupiter and Saturn, which occurs on and off for about a year period around the change of every decade. So in 1900, 1920, 1940, 1960, here we got 61, 1980, 2000, 2020, so on. Jupiter and Saturn align. It creates the phenomenon of the decade. Now, Jupiter is about expansion, Saturn's about contraction. And I think that this piece of your chart speaks to the push-pull, do it, don't do it, everything's going great, whoops, I got to pull back, oh, I pulled back too much, I don't want to do it, I got to do it, all right, I'm going to do it, oh, too much again. There's a sense of unevenness in how, I have a friend, Caroline Casey, who once called this peristalsis, which is what happens in the intestines to move stuff along. It's that expansion. That's in a way the story of your life. It's like too much, not enough, too much, not enough. Okay. Now, having said that, you're coming out of right now, or actually have come out of one of these contractive not enough phases. And it's done, it's over, at least for now. There's always more. But Saturn, the planet of contraction, over this last year, starting last fall, and then again this spring, and then again mid-late summer, Saturn moved through Libra, is still moving through Libra, but was aligned, conjuncting your sun, forcing you to take responsibility, perhaps taking things away, forcing you to make a stand, to in some way deal with the hardship of not having what you thought you had. And this is it's a seed period and a very strong, very powerful period, but it's largely over. Does that make sense?
Okay. Thank you so much, Linda. Let's take a look at the next chart.
Deborah.
August 12th.
Deborah! You're in another land back there.
Hi, how you doing? It's interesting to look at charts if you're unfamiliar with them, because you can see how the distributions of planets can be so different.
Yeah, just look at the difference between these two.
Yeah, Linda's chart is what we call a rising or Eastern-oriented chart, which is primarily about I have to do it myself. And let's go to Deborah here.
Yep.
Deborah has got a lower hemisphere chart. Not all of it, but most things are below the horizon. The bottom half of the chart, the area that's literally below the horizon, represents things that grow out of the inside of a person. So the strength of a lower hemisphere chart is connecting to oneself. And the weakness of a lower hemisphere chart is sometimes being overly subjective. All right, look at this. Close Sun-Pluto conjunction.
So we talked about not messing with Linda. Forget, mess with Linda. Don't mess with Deborah.
Well, Linda's just the hitman. Deborah is the mafia boss.
Working for Deborah.
Yeah, I think so. In this case.
Well, what Jeff is talking about is this very close conjunction between the Sun in Leo lined up with Pluto in Leo. Pluto is the planet of death, destruction, intensity, but it's not death as an ending, and it's not physical death. It's the death as the beginning of that rebirth cycle that we talked about earlier. This is about powerful, passionate intensity that is quite strong with the Sun lined up with Pluto.
Yeah, another thing that's interesting in this chart is the moon. The moon's always important in a chart. And Deborah has the moon in outgoing, enthusiastic Sagittarius, which is a fire sign like her Sun-Pluto conjunction. And I wonder if you don't make things so complicated that they've got to fail, so then you get to start all over again. Because Sun-Pluto loves to, I shouldn't say love, but it really can be involved in processes that go to extremes, then they die, and we have to start all over again. That Sagittarius moon is about what's next, and yet Deborah's got 3 planets and the path of least resistance, the moon's south node, an overly analytical Virgo, and that's why I think the mechanism may be, it's not carelessness that leads to crisis and transformation, it's hypervigilance and sort of being so tied up in the knots of details that then can lead to transformation.
But she loves the upset.
I think so.
Not only because of the Sagittarius moon, but Jupiter in Aries likes the new, and that Jupiter is square to Uranus. This is like, give me some blue sky, wide horizons, and I don't care where we're going. Let's just go.
Well, the counterforce, or a counterforce here, is the ascendant, which is Taurus, and that's how you want to come across with your ascendant. So the Taurus rising can never look like a hitman. The Taurus rising can wear farmer overalls or be your friendly fascist banker or, the crooked pharmacist. But the superficial sort of, I'm here to help and not mess anything up. And even Mars, the warrior planet, if Mars is the igniter here, And this is quite interesting because Mars is in Cancer. Mars in Cancer is not a troublemaker. I'm just here to help. I'm just here to pull things together. But Mars,
Manipulate.
big fat green line, is in a stressy relationship with that moon in Sagittarius. So it's like, oh, I'm getting everything all in the right way now, just so, again, it can go somewhere else later. And by the way, Deborah, the north node of the moon, a point of growth or integration, is in Pisces. So I think it's fine if you don't necessarily know where you're going. Yeah, that is a good thing. Good, good. And the reason is that the south node of the moon is a path of least resistance, or an old, maybe karmic pattern in Virgo, tends to be overly analytical and caught up in process and method, where the growth point or the integrated point of the north node in Pisces is feeling, is something more general. The details matter less than the spirit that you bring to things. Anything about timing here we got?
Saturn has recently gone over the T-square with opposition to Neptune, conjunction to Neptune, opposition to Jupiter, and square to Uranus.
So work-related illusions have run into a wall, and craft or work-related ideals or dreams may be getting a little bit of substance. And Jupiter is not going to turn around for a couple of more months, but Jupiter now in Taurus will next spring, I'm not sure when, turn around, go forward, and cross over your Taurus ascendant. So there is a physically, materially, socially visible period of expansion, teaching, selling, promoting coming up for you
with Pluto
next spring.
there now,
Right.
you're in a place of, regardless of whether or not you've been dealing with stress, there is something here about the personal power that you get to express in your life. It's kind of like you're not one to be argued with now. Finally. There you go.
I do have a question. The next 4 years with the Pluto square Uranus, it's going to be activating a T-square with my Pluto.
Both Pluto and Uranus will be, slow-moving Pluto and Uranus will be moving across this point and this point opposite here, kind of making this red triangle into a square. And yeah, it's part of a very slow-moving transition. It involves outer planets in your chart, so I don't know that it'll be, you're going to say something?
Well, I'm just thinking Pluto will be at the top of your chart, so it's career, whether it's retirement at your age or a whole new career or social service or something to do in the world. It's taking, all of those times you've sat on the sidelines with your better ideas. It's about committing to those better ideas. That comes from Jupiter, the know-it-all planet, in Aries. Only Deborah knows, but in the closet of her chart. So Deborah, alone at home in front of her TV with a six-pack, has figured out more about the meaning of life than all of the rest of us in the room, and she's going to start showing us that over the next few years. Thank you, Deborah. Now,
Sue.
is Sue a first name or is that a verb? Oh, okay.
Where's Sue? Oh, yeah.
Sue is over here. Hi, Sue.
Hi, Sue.
Lots of Virgo tonight. 3 Venus in Virgos. The odds of that, it's to get 3 of anything's a 1 out of 144 chance. 1 in 12 for 2 people having the same thing, by 12 for 3. All Venus in Virgos tonight. I feel like I'm not clean
Making
enough.
a list.
Yeah. I better go home and repack
List
and
maker,
refold.
list maker, make
Because
things.
Venus in Virgo is the appreciation of neatness. Although Sue, like, was it? No. You're the Venus Pluto. Linda.
Yeah, Linda.
Had the Venus. Both of you have Venus Pluto together. Not together, but individually. Venus Pluto conjunction in Virgo. Honestly, it is one of the finest filters of discrimination and judgment that can be incredibly detailed and refined and bitchy, because the contractive nature and the analytical nature of Virgo and I was looking at her and it was about you because, anyway, Good trick. But it's the awareness of what's wrong, the hyper awareness of what's wrong. And perhaps the most challenging is what's flawed in oneself. And as I've said here on more than one occasion, the thing about Virgo is you don't have to be perfect, you just have to be improving. And when Venus is joined with Pluto, we can reach those points of going, oh, I can't improve that. I'm sunk. It's stuck. There's no way. But when the desire is strong enough, there's almost nothing you can't improve, except my behavior. Or his, even worse.
So as I look at this chart, I see this kind of a delicious dilemma between the sun and moon in water signs. The sun in Cancer, which has strong feelings but can sometimes hold them in because it's either afraid of rejection or shy or just not wanting to make big ripples, even though the feelings are very strong. That inward direction is intensified by the moon in Scorpio, which adds concentration and power. And we're going to hold the concept for a moment that Pluto and Mars are the planets of Scorpio, and in your chart, these planets are very strong and together. But what's interesting is that the sun in Cancer, harmonized or trine with the moon in Scorpio, has expansive, opportunistic, confident Jupiter lined up there. And so there is this strength and that belies whatever it is that's not put out onto the surface. Now we come to the surface, and there's this whole Leo show going on with Mars and Mercury straddling and crazy Uranus all straddling the ascendant that really can be very effective in its presentation when it has something to say. And yet, although Jeff talked about the Venus conjunction to Pluto, it's really Pluto at the midpoint, or at least pulling in both Mars and Venus. Venus and Mars are the lovers. And here we have passionate, intense, play for keeps. You know, Pluto that's pulling those energies in and harmonized by a trine to Saturn, which is a tremendous amount of inner strength. So as I look at your chart, I can see that there's a whole lot more going on than meets the surface. Your personality on some level is something that you play well in order to get the effects that you're looking for. And behind that, there's a high level of self-control and yet a strong optimism that I think can leak out once you get excited. So that's my short little.
Yeah, and a lot of nervous energy and mental energy. Mercury, the planet of the mind, is not only in creative Leo, but it's joined Uranus, the planet of innovation. So Mercury, Uranus is often very bright, sees things differently than other people see them. And it's a very interesting thing. How hard should you try to make these things happen? Jupiter, hooked up with the sun and moon, means that on the larger scale, you know everything's okay. It's just that life gets complicated when you drill down to the details. And what I think is really helpful in this chart, your North Node in Libra says, Sue, make yourself comfortable. Be careful. Don't worry about other people's crises so much. The South Node, the path of least resistance, is in Aries, got to act now, in the 8th house of emergencies and shared issues. And because of this tightly wired nervous system and this big spirit that you have, it's easy to get so caught up in the crises that are out there. And I think a counterpoint, and a healthy one for you, is that, you know, am I comfy now? Do I like the way I look? Do I feel good on the couch? I don't care if it's dumb. I don't care what's going on out there. That, I think, is a nice buffer for some of the complexity and tight intellectual wiring that's there. Any present tense?
Well, Saturn is coming up to square the sun,
right?
Having conjuncted it back, in 2006, somewhere in there. So the seed period, the things that you ran into with trouble back then, in some ways may be coming around now that create some sort of crisis of you need to make a decision. This may not be, you may be feeling it, you may already know what this is, but it may not be until early next spring. when Saturn reaches that degree that will force you to make a decision that in some way may play back to a position that you were forced to take on some level, 6, 7, 8 years ago, somewhere in there.
Another angle on it is Saturn will be in the third house of communication. Write your book, tell your story. It's interesting. There's a lot of creativity in this chart. And yet in the fifth house of self-expression and creativity, you have Saturn, the planet of restraint. So the negative side of that is the person with Saturn in the fifth sometimes goes through that process as, well, I can't create, or I'm not going to get supported for it unless I'm perfect, unless I was a child prodigy, which often is the case. And yet coming back to it is about using the structure and discipline to take the crazy, wild, out of the box, off the wall ideas and concepts you have and present them in the way that you enjoy and that we can also appreciate.
That Saturn, though, is aspected as about as well as a Saturn could possibly be.
Yeah.
It's trine Pluto, Venus, and Mars. It's sextile Neptune.
Yeah.
And so that there is this sense of the structure, whether it's the fifth house as creator or the fifth house as parent. In some ways, there's something here about the reliability and the ability for you to create structure for other people, I think, if not for yourself.
But there's the risk of high expectations. Jupiter's a planet of expansion. It was next to your moon and trine your sun.
Yeah.
Oh, I grew up in a household in which there were some high expectations, but it's in Scorpio, so that was sort of used maybe to point out what was flawed or wrong, and it's sort of, you can do anything, so why aren't you? And why aren't you doing it as perfectly and as brilliantly? So that's another version of the story. So thank you, Sue, for letting us tell those stories. Thank you, Soul Food. Thank you, Soul Food community. We'll see you next month. Thank you, Rick.
And remember that this event is free, and the way that you vote your appreciation for either being here or having Soul Food here or having us here is by buying shit. So don't be afraid to get that gift that you were thinking about getting, or buy that book, or buy another cup of coffee, even if you don't need it.
And who won the guitar tonight? Don't we give away one of those every month?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, there's the scores. Mr. Positive, I got you. Right in your Taurus, man. Thank you so much. Have a great month.
And we got a plane to catch.
Yeah.